Surprise! We have faces.
I know it's a bit off-putting.
Let us know how you feel about them in the comments.
We can put them away, please.
We don't have to show. We just thought it might be a nice change. As always, I'm Connor.
And I'm Jack.
And you're listening to Building Better Dungeons. But we'll get immediately to it. Korea is primed to release on Arena anyway. On the Thursday, the 16th. Mm-hmm. Everyone is talking about that. That's what anyone in any of the subreddits or the forums is having a chat about. But we're going to be talking about something completely different because we know trends. You know what's just on the horizon? Alara. What was Alara like? But more importantly, what can we learn from how Alara was like? What are we going to be doing today, Jack?
It wouldn't really be a Building Better Dungeons video if we weren't going to talk about the Magic the Gathering color pie. Woo! Alara was a place where there were actually 5 different worlds. In Magic the Gathering, we call them planes, but it's basically 5 individual societies, little snapshots of a world, of a planet, of a city.
And in this video, we're going to be having a little bit of a look into all of them. But we're not just going to be perusing Magic the Gathering lore. All of the shards of Alara, as they're called, are societies, first and foremost. And they all come from the colors of Magic that are chosen to represent them in a very interesting way. If you're interested in world building, or if you're interested in running a game of Dungeons and Dragons, then the societies in Alara have a lot to teach you because it's all very formulaic. It all comes out of the system that they set on. Magic the Gathering hasn't really done societies like that before or since.
I mean, I suppose the closest thing are the guilds from Ravnica, but even then, Alara, they did entire worlds, like huge societies. The guilds are sort of small microcosms, whereas the Shards of Alara, as if almost an entire planet had to follow these rules.
We're going to be today having a look at each of them. We're going to be going into the lore, what they were all like, what it was like to live on them, and also what their construction and how they came about can teach us as world builders and dungeon masters. What is the first Shard of Alara, Jack?
The first Shard of Alara we're going to take a look at is Bant, which is blue and green and white. White being in the center. So we've talked about colors before, but just a brief rundown. White is the color of community. It's like everyone
Peace through structure.
Exactly. When everyone comes together, everyone has an absolutely fabulous time. Blue is the color of progress.
Yeah, perfection through knowledge. The more we know about things, the better we can make them, and the better we can make ourselves.
And green is the color of traditionalism and nature.
Wisdom through acceptance. Just go with the flow, understand your place in the world, and that's how you'll be happiest.
The special thing about the shards is even though there are 3 colors coming together, there's always one that's in charge, that's, captaining the ship. And for Bant, that's the color white. So you're going to expect a lot of structure and a lot of faith in that structure. People are going to be together in nice, big, lovely clans, and you see exactly that on Bant.
Bant is a society of hierarchies. Everyone enjoys, whether they enjoy it or not, they do it. They come together and they exist in relation to one another. And those hierarchies are very formal. In Bant, knowing your place is important and being the best you can be within that place, within that spot in society is really, really important. The people who are the lowest of the low in Bant are those people who are selfish, who make their own decisions, who don't care about their community. Thieves and rogues. Those people are not well liked by society at all. I mean, they're not well liked by most societies, but they're especially taboo in Bant. A big part of Bant culture is the Knights. People know Elspeth. She didn't get her start, but she made a name for herself as a knight on Bant. It was really, really important for you to be able to, it was quite a blue thing, show that you were the perfect warrior, learn as much as there was to know, but also it was a bit of a green thing, prove that you are strongest, find the best version of yourself that, you can be within society. The whole reason for all of it was very, very white. The knights didn't want to become the best knight for fame or for glory. They did it because how conflicts are resolved in Bant are all very orderly. Whenever people were scrabbling over resources or whenever they had a disagreement that they couldn't solve, each side would come together very civilly. They would elect a knight. The 2 knights would fight to the death. Whichever knight won, that side got their way in the argument, and everyone respected that. And that kind of rigid structural hierarchy in Bant is really interesting and kind of bizarre to see, but it all comes very naturally out of the 3 colors that makes it up. And 3 colors is just enough. It's the perfect amount for society, really. But any fewer, and it's difficult to have a realistic sense, people can express themselves within Bant. There's enough leeway in what's allowed in that society for interesting characterization to come out. 2 colors and 1 color is not so much, and 4 colors is too many. 3 is really perfect.
4 colors gets very messy, but it's specifically the idea of if you have a bunch of white clerics coming together. Societies don't look like that. You don't have all these people who have exactly the same opinions and share exactly the same beliefs. You want your society to be a little more dynamic, and most societies are. You want them to be able to bounce off each other and have maybe not opposing ideas, but ideas that contrast each other and bring out the best in each other.
The really interesting thing about structuring societies in this way, as to saying, what is allowed and creating a defined space, is you give characters a really interesting thing to bounce off of. Thieves, the selfish people in Bant, the people who they believe in that they should be able to have more freedom, they're more red. People who believe that, they shouldn't have to listen to any rules, they should be able to do what they want, whatever gets them the most power, the black side of things. Those characters don't gel well with Bant society at all, and in a really interesting way, there isn't a spot for them. And so they have nothing left to do but rebel. And that's an interesting thing to note when you're doing world building or when you're doing, creating a society for Dungeons and Dragons. Villains work wonderfully when they contrast nicely with the society that they're in. So, having this kind of ordered system, the colors of magic, to create your society really lets you demarcate what kind of villains exist outside of it.
If your society is going to be white, blue, green, then you might want your villain to be red and black. So that means you always have obvious reasons for them to be at odds with each other. And especially for your players when you're world building a society and a city or a town or a country for your players to inhabit. Countries work on broad strokes, societies have broad opinions on other societies and broad opinions on, how they should treat each other and that kind of stuff. So being able to apply the colors to that, your players automatically get a kind of a sense of, they don't have to be asking you all those silly questions of like, what do we think about this other warring clan, or what does our country think about this scientific advancement? If your kingdom is a blue kingdom, then it's going to love the scientific advancement, and it's a really lovely moment when your players can sort of build up the confidence to say, oh, this is such a well-defined world, I already know what they think about this new scientific invention, or what they think about that race from across the river.
Oh, this is possible without having a rigid structure, like the color system here to bring it up. But the color system really helps put it in sharp relief. The really interesting thing about these kind of societies, built up from colors, is their relationship, how well they often match up with other societies or groups that you might be familiar with from pop culture. Do you remember off the top of your head, Jack, what fictional society we said was like the Knights of Bant?
Of course we did. This is a heavily scripted episode. Bant follows very closely alongside the Jedi Order, which is a lovely group of people coming together, structure, white. They're coming together, but they practice traditional, old world magic.
The Force is really quite green. It's the thing that binds everyone together. It's the central life force that flows through all things. So it's not something you are really supposed to impose your will on. And when you do, that gets very black and red, very black and red very quickly.
Blue is how they interact with this. It's very meditative, but also like they have grand libraries. It's kind of book learning. Their swords, instead of being, wooden sticks, are laser swords. They have this whole big contrived tradition about going out and finding the perfect crystal to put into your laser sword. Really see the contrast between where the blue is more important and where the green is more important. So if we go back to the prequels, back when we were in, the Republic and the Jedi Order had these vast cities and temples and they were training all the younglings. It's like they ran schools and they had like little robot droids that the younglings would have to, fight with their laser swords. And that's like quite, self-improvement, progression blue. But then when we go into the newer series of movies, Luke is hanging out on, an abandoned old tree reading ancient, leather-skinned books. And that's where you see the green being in charge. They've sort of left behind a lot of the, book learning. They left behind a lot of their technology and they've gone back to their roots. And, it's cool. It's cool to see the contrast between those. It's a very good example for that.
The colors working together in perfect harmony is quite difficult. It makes a lot of sense from a world building point of view to have one color be in charge. Yes, green is very important in Bant, and yes, blue is very important in Bant. They get to play in the playground, but it's white's playground. They get to help build, but it's white's blueprints. The entire society is all about white goals, coming together, being stronger together, the structure, the hierarchy. That's one of the questions you can ask yourself. What does Bant look if it's more about green? What does Bant look like if conservatism, if being one with nature, if all that kind of thing is much
traditions,
if those are not just even brought to the forefront, but if that's what the society is about, if that's the goals and doing it in a blue-white way, That's quite different from Bant. And the same thing, if the society is about learning and perfection and becoming the best version of yourself, blue, with like white green means, then it looks quite different. And one of the things that it might begin to approach is...
So like everything in Magic the Gathering, there's always 5 of them. The next plane we're going to talk about is Esper, where blue's in charge.
And its friends are white and black.
So we're going to bring along white from Bant, but we're going to throw away the green in place of black. Black, as we've talked about before, is the selfishness color. It's the color of ambition and personal goals. And when all of this gets mixed together in the melting pot that is Esper, you get a society of very well-read, intelligent individuals who all love working together to be the best perfect versions of themselves. They take this to very spooky extremes. Because you have that little bit of black in there, making for the, black is willing to cross not every line, but any line. That's where you get the weird Ethereum shapers. People on Esper literally take this magical, this magical MacGuffin metal that exists on their world, and they turn themselves into it, making themselves into beautiful filigreed robots.
That's something that a blue-white society by itself, I think, wouldn't necessarily cross those kind of lines, but it's black's willingness to do whatever it takes for its goals. Very little organic life, wholly organic life, left on Esper. Esper is really a place all about becoming the best version of yourself at any cost. And it's also not a place where instinct, where nature, where like feelings have any place. You have a disagreement in Esper. It's not quite as structured as they do it on Bant.
Everything anyone ever does on Esper is because it's the smartest thing to do, not because, oh, my granddad used to solve problems this way.
Your granddad was, in comparison to what everyone looks like now, quite out of date. One of the interesting things about Alara is how they justified what all of their societies look like. The reason Esper is so focused on perfection is because they have ready access to this very strange material. Ethereum,
Ethereum.
It's a very scarce resource, and you can do a lot of beautiful things with it. So the society ended up revolving around using it to make miracle inventions and using it to do all sorts of crazy things. That's why the blue in Esper was so nurtured, because it had ready access to this material with which, if you knew a lot about it, you could do some incredible things. The society that we're going to compare Esper to, statistically, some of you are going to be Star Trek fans, and you will like the unequivocally, objectively best Star Trek series, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where the Dominion exist as a force. If you are a fan of that show, they already would have sounded a little bit familiar. The Dominion, they exist to research. They exist to go outside and learn as many new things about the world around them as possible, with the overall goal being to control it and have none of it surprise them. They don't really care for feelings as we think about them. They are very communal. The Dominion, they have a line, no member of the Dominion has ever harmed another. They really do care about that community structure, but it's not for its own ends. It's for very blue ends. And they do a lot of very starkly black things. They're not although they are collective, they don't particularly care about anyone who's outside of that collective, and do a lot of awful things, like breeding a slave race that is chemically dependent on the Dominion to survive. The Dominion leans a little bit more black than I think Esper does. Esper, definitely black is a big part of it, but black is there for blue ends. Black is, again, blue steering the ship. Black is just helping out. Whereas the Dominion, black's a little bit more in the fore. And you can really see in both examples how they are defined by being white, blue, and black, and defined by not being red and green. Tradition, unimportant. Feelings, unimportant. Being your best self, that's what matters.
Speaking about being your best self, there's no other shard of Alara, no other world to be a better self than at Grixis. Grixis is red and blue and black, so centering on black this time. And adding in red. So red, as we talked about before, is the color of making your own choices, having your opinion heard, passion and anger and fury. So adding that in with blue is kind of interesting, and a little bit of a theme you'll see with all of these sets of colors is usually just by the way the system works, it's two enemies working together for a common goal that they share. So in Esper, it was white and black, white about all that structure and black about all that selfishness, but all working together for the blue goals. And you see the same thing on Grixis, where Blue is all about being, making smart, intelligent, thought out plans. When red's all about being, no, surprise your opponent, jump on them from the ceiling, they'll never see that coming. But when you see them put together, they all can agree to work for the black goals of like, oh, it doesn't matter if I blow my enemy up with some gunpowder that I blew into their eyes, the red way, or if I spent months planning their demise from the back of a cavern, the blue way. That's all going to further the black goals of self-ambition and, pulling yourself along in the world.
We should talk a little bit more about particularly what Grixis looks like. Whereas Ethereum was the thing that drove Esper to be blue, Viz is what drives Grixis to be black. Grixis is a very strange place to live. It's full of necromantically resurrected zombies and all sorts of undead and cursed things walking around the place. The living people, who are just called vitals in the plane by themselves and by everyone just refers to them as vitals, they've got a resource called Viz that is just their life force, and that's how stuff gets done on Grixis. If you want to tend to some fields, you don't do it the normal green or white way. You don't get some people together and do it. You just raise some corpses, infuse them with Viz, and have them do it for you.
Believe me, there are a lot of corpses on Grixis.
Yes. You could be a real connoisseur of corpses on Grixis. There was no community, there was no sense of structure to it. Any way you can think of getting your hands on Viz, whoever has Viz is in charge. So the society is very selfish, very individualistic, willing to make plans and act rashly in equal measure, whatever gets them the most Viz. And it's that selfishness that's at the core of Grixis that makes it a horrifying place to live, but a really interesting place to look into. What was the pop culture example of a place that resembled Grixis, Jack?
So the pop culture example we were looking into was Rapture from the BioShock games. And Rapture is just a great example of red and black and blue working together. It's supposed to be this collection of progressives. It's, it's like, oh, we're all such geniuses. We've all got so much money that we're just going to build our own town. And there's going to be, hook hands and drugs. It's a lovely example because it's progressive. It's all about technology. It takes an immense amount of work to be able to live under the sea, but it's all for selfish reasons. Everyone who goes to Rapture is trying to go there to basically avoid the law. They're all going, well, I mean, this whole, working underneath the government and alongside my fellow man is all right and all, but if I could own the sweat of my own brow, think of how much I could get done. And then the red side of it is just, that's where all the crazy, drugs and and wild stuff happens, where it's just like these people, once they got there, they were like, oh, this is ours. We can do whatever we like with this. And they did some stuff, let me tell you.
No, wait, that's not what the video's about,
No.
I won't let you tell us. Humor. Grixis is an interesting place to talk about specifically how these societies are defined by their components just as much as they're defined by the complement of those components, the things that is outside of them. Grixis is a place where no one works together and there isn't a community. I mean, people work together, it's for 5 seconds, and someone's getting their back stabbed. And the same, Rapture was a place where people wanted to escape the government taxing their income so that they could spend it on social programs. People in Rapture, much like people in Grixis, don't have a lot of empathy for their fellow man or much of an interest in social programs. The red is a really interesting aspect of Grixis. Not necessarily always doing things the best way or the most planned way, often doing things the way that it feels good. What does a society that leans more into that red base look like?
Into the red base, we're throwing out blue and bringing back in green for traditions. We're looking at Jund. Jund is red and black and green, focusing on red, I hope. Yes. Focusing on red. Jund is the scary plane of the food chain. The only thing that exists on Jund is a terrifying drive to live and things wanting to kill you. It's just this constant fight for survival, mostly, except for the goblins. Goblins are weird.
Jund is a wonderful place, and it makes sense to think of it as the opposite of blue-white. Blue-white is all about structure, coming together and making plans that better everyone. That's antithetical to what Jund's all about. Jund has, it's even as a geographic entity, you've got all these active volcanoes, and the air tastes of sulfur constantly, which is an aesthetic one could hold. So you have dragons at the top of this food chain, flying around the place, breathing fire, being terrible. You have humans and lizard people via Shino, sort of in the middle of the pack, prey and predator, they're all in one, hunting and being completely free. Everyone on Jund, they don't think about what they're doing necessarily. They act on how they feel, and it feels good until it feels bad because you're being eaten. So 2 really good world building details in Jund that come out of the structure that was used to create it, the fact that it's made of red, blue, and black, and these are wonderful details. I really do love a lot of the world building in Magic the Gathering sometimes. So we have the goblins on the bottom of the food chain. You might think, oh, I mean, they're not going to enjoy being on the bottom of the food chain. What are they going to do? If Jund were a place where you had access to blue ideas and white ideas, then the goblins might band together. They might make plans. They might try to use numbers and thinking to outsmart, but that's just not what Jund's about.
There ain't no cops on Jund.
Any schools on Jund for the goblins to learn our plan. So what they are about instead is accepting their place in society. They exist in a fervent competition to be eaten by the most impressive thing. Goblins don't want to be eaten by people. They don't want to be eaten by cats. They don't want to be eaten by lizard folk. I mean, maybe they'll be eaten by like an incredible warrior. But what they want to be eaten by is dragons. And they engage in all sorts of nonsense, climbing to the peak of the highest mountain, building ever more illogical and awful places that are higher and higher up in the hopes that a dragon will come along and swipe them down. And that is just really archetypal of like that kind of world building detail. You really see how it comes out of the fact that there isn't any blue-white on Jund, and there's a lot of red and a lot of black and a lot of green. The second detail that I love is the dragons, when they die, they don't want to leave any inheritance for their children, and they don't want to create any big structures to help memorialize them when they're gone. What they would rather do instead is fly headfirst into a volcano, and the ensuing explosion leaves a giant crater. It's a big narcissistic piece of self-expression.
What's the most chaos I can cause in the smallest amount of time while still succeeding in dying?
Everyone around in that blast radius guaranteed goner.
Oh yeah.
So those sort of world-building details are really, really charming to me. Will we have a quick chat, Jack, about the pop culture society that most resembles Jund?
The pop culture society that most resembles Jund. I forgot it again.
This is the second take, and he's forgotten it again. It's the Ravagers.
The Ravager from Guardians of the Galaxy, a movie I've seen many a time.
Anyhow, the Ravagers exist, and they exist in this very interesting space where they are anti-blue-white. They don't have any blue-white in them at all. Blue-white is the color of structure and order. Don't do what you want to do. Do what we tell you is best for the community. People who are the Ravagers, I mean, do they exist in communities? Yes, but they exist in communities with each other, not on any particular planet. They are on ships together. They're big space criminals, like space pirates, essentially. And they don't lay port anywhere for too long because the structure and society doesn't gel with them. They are super into freedom. That's why they're red. But they also are a nasty bunch. A lot of killing, a lot of murdering, a lot of taking stuff, a lot of stealing. And that's the black. And they hurt people because it makes them feel good. They enjoy seeing the suffering they cause. So that's quite black-red. They don't exist without a code. There's a lot of tradition in the Ravagers. There's a lot of, finding your place in the wider world, even if you don't want to be a part of any individual society because it's too restrictive. And I think it's really interesting what the one taboo is in Ravager society. You can, blow people up in a parlay in Ravager society. You can, butcher your children and eat a baby. You can do all sorts of horrible things. But what you can't do, because the Ravagers, the reason they are Ravagers is because they want freedom and they hate order being imposed on them. They hate being told what to do. You can't be a slaver. The Ravager character in Guardians of the Galaxy gets in trouble for when there's an economic downturn. He deals in slavery. Imposing those orders and structures on someone else, even though the Ravagers are very selfish, that's something they won't do. And that's the green in them, I think, really coming out to pass. It's because they're green, red, and black. They hate order and structure, not just when it's applied to them, but in the general sense. They wouldn't inflict it on anyone else.
Sometimes you create a group of people, a society, or maybe a collection of villains or whatever, and the colors you set them, maybe you set them, you set them as black. They're purely selfish and they only care about their own needs, but you kind of need a reason for them to stick together and work together. Colors love working together in spite of the other colors. No particular part of red, green, black wants to work together. Maybe green a little bit.
I talked about Naya in all the previous takes. Jack, you can begin now.
Naya is a place... okay, sorry. I'll take this seriously. Naya is the plane where green is in charge. It's the colors green and white and red working together. What does a plane like that look like? Well, it's this lovely, natural, well-forested area where these giant monsters, who aren't really evil, just really neglectful...
Not evil at all. They're just big.
They're just big. They're huge. So they do the stomping on everything all the time. As you can kind of infer from this, technology isn't particularly advanced because someone invented the wheel and then they stomped on it. The motor electric generator, stomped on. Healthcare, stomped on. So what you have is a bunch of sort of tribes of different clans of people, like the cat folk and the folk and the elf folk. They all live in their own little tribes and they try to work together and get on with nature as best as they can.
The reason that green is the focus is because people don't try to hunt these monsters ordinarily. What they want to do most of the time is adapt to the ecology, know their place inside it. But they're not purely green. They do have a lot of ordered structures. In the case of the catfolk, so ordered that the society ended up crumbling from the inside because it became too oppressive. And they also are deeply passionate, especially when they engage in wars between each other. Green-white knows how to wage a war, but green-white-red knows how to really have at it. Very cute world building detail. Because the people here, they're not blue, they're not black, they can't really think of a way to take advantage of the situation and kill these beasts. So what they do instead is they try and work with them. They build giant makeshift plows and wrap them around the beasts. Try to get some farming done that way. Jack, people might not know this about you, but you come from a farming background. Would that work? Would having a giant plow be better than having lots of small plows?
So as a farmer son from Wexford, yes, that does work, especially the bigger the monster, the better the plow. Because they kind of stomp along on the dirt. I don't know. Horses do plowing? Tractors?
Oxen do, definitely. Naughty children in Wexford do a lot of plowing.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so that's the situation we have going there. For whatever reason, a lot of the story took place on Naya, particularly about all the societies and how they warred, and there was a rebellion, which is quite red-white.
Johnny's from Naya, isn't he?
Who knows? Who cares? I mean, the Magic the Gathering fans do, but this is a society. Not...
Google it, you nerds.
What is the society from real-world pop culture that we like to compare and contrast with the Naya?
We have chosen to talk about the Na'vi from the Avatar film. There was supposed to be a second one. From the Avatar film. So their whole shtick is they've got a whole planet in perfect harmony with nature and themselves and a beautiful... Okay, Connor's got to go away. So the thing about the Na'vi is they've got this whole planet that's like working together in perfect harmony. That they've got this lovely tribe of everyone who loves talking to each other. They've got the green for the nature, the white for the tribe. And
I mean, the white isn't... When people work together, that isn't inherently white. But the Na'vi, it's a very ordered, structured society where there are rules that you're not supposed to break. And those are important. That's where the white comes from. It says people can work together without being white. It's that ordered, structured sense of community where you sacrifice your personal freedoms for the community, where the white really comes in. The way that red comes in is because a green-white society, they'd work together in a structured way and they'd meditate on nature, but the Na'vi have a very impassioned, emotional way of connecting with their environment that is uniquely red. And when I say uniquely, just physiologically, they have that interesting sci-fi world-building detail. They can plug themselves into nature and have a direct one-to-one feeling connection.
The Na'vi don't write beautiful poetry about how much they feel at nature. They plug themselves in and share feelings.
Well, actually, if you'd been to the Avatar theme park, the immersive experience, you'd know that there's a lot of Na'vi poetry. Most of it recited in song. Aloha.
We're going to link the video in the top left.
You can see that humans in that movie, the Avatar, are definitely blue-black. They're there to learn about the Na'vi or learn about the planet. You know, they're definitely there for blue reasons, but they're definitely there for exploitative black reasons. In the same way that Jedi Order are like a blue, white, green versus black, red Sith. You'll often find that the colors of magic get cut down like this. There's an even line. The red, white, green Na'vi are fighting the blue, black humans in that film. It's just the structure comes up in an interesting way. You think that Richard Garfield really hit on something half decent as a way to structure societies. That's Naya in a nutshell. Oh, that'll be the thumbnail, hopefully. We bring you all this not just to deep dive into the 5 shards of Alara, but also to show you the kind of interesting world building that can be done just from saying my society is made up of these 3 core principles and how they rock off. It doesn't have to be the Colors Magic the Gathering. That's one that's quite robust. We like it. It could be the Myers-Briggs personality test, or God forbid, the Harry Potter Hogwarts houses. One of the cool things that you can use this system for when you're world building or when you're running the game of Dungeons and Dragons. Let's say the Emperor has said, all of a sudden we're going to really crack down on crime because we have to start working together more. If your society is blue, black, white, they might have mixed feelings about that. The white part of it might be into it, the black part of it might be not. If your society is black, blue, red, they're going to hate that idea. But if it's green, blue, white, they would probably be pretty in favor of it. If you were able to classify your society in these relatively simple ways, then you get a good grasp on how they're going to react to things without having to put a huge amount of thought into it. It's a nice shortcut to be able to use. The systems we are talking about really come into interesting effect when we show what happened on Alara. The lore behind it was that there was once a cohesive plane where all the colors existed in harmony. How sweet. That was split up unnaturally. We had these mini planes, shards of planes, where certain colors of magic did not exist. And that's why they had this cool world building where you get to see, when there's just 3 colors, how does it happen? But that meant that, while the society was defined by those 3 colors, it was equally defined by the 2 colors that were missing. And you can see this in how when the shards of Alara came smashing back together, it didn't work out well for any shard at all. Now, think about Bant. White, blue, green. Color of hierarchy, of working together, being the best version of yourself for everyone else. Selfishness and individuality and dirty tricks and all that kind of thing weren't really a part of the repertoire. And that meant that when Bant encountered other shards, other people who were willing to play that kind of game, it didn't go well for them. By that same metric, blue, white, black, Esper, very good at planning ahead, very good at coming up with contingencies, very bad at feeling and improvising.
Not a creative bone in their body.
We're not just doing a lore deep dive into Alara, are we, Jack?
We're specifically coming at this for the angle of using the colors from Magic the Gathering to be able to not necessarily build your own worlds. You can use them to build your own worlds. They're very robust, but it's mostly as a tool for DMs and players to understand their worlds easier. It's,
More easily.
And
now that I can interrupt you for grammatical reasons, I can interrupt you for content reasons as well. If you are able to categorize, are all those slurping noises going to be in the... If you know how to categorize the societies and the cultures that you've built, then you'll be able to know at a glance how they respond to different stimulus. For example, the emperor of the land has a big decree. He's going to really tamp and cramp down and crack down on thievery and criminality because we all have to work together. If you have a white, blue, green society, they're probably going to be really into it. Blue, black, red society, less so. And if you have a blue, white, black society, that might be a bit of a mix. They might not be quite sure how they're going to handle that. It's difficult to keep a whole culture in your head at all times, right? I mean, especially as a DM, you're going to want to put all your nuance, all your personality into it. And it might be difficult to know how they respond to absolutely everything. But if you can simply break them down and categorize them with colors, you'll find that it's a lot simpler to say, oh, well, here's a society that's just come in a big merchant ship, and they're black-green. Well, how is my white-red-green society going to interact with that? Well, they're going to like these parts, they're not going to like these parts. The whole raison d'etre of this channel is that having more angles of understanding for the stuff that you write and the stuff that you enjoy and appreciate is always better.
It makes it easier for you to communicate them to your players, and especially in this case, it makes it easier for your players to interact with it. Because if your players know what your society, what your world is colored, they already have an idea of how it's going to interact with their choices and their decisions.
Exactly. Hopefully this was a useful episode of Building Better Dungeons, a channel name we have to be ever careful not to abbreviate. We have a viewometrics wise at the end of the video, only like 5% of people are here. So you're our real fans.
We'd like to thank that 5%.
Yes, no, we really would. The channel has really blown up over the past 12, 13 days, 2 weeks. We really enjoy that. As long as you guys keep watching, we're going to keep making. And actually, if you stop watching, we're going to keep making to chase the high. It's lovely. Thank you everyone who commented. Particularly, we do try to respond to every comment.
You guys have been so engaged, and just thank you for that.
No, it's a lot of fun. I've been pretty sick recently. My doctor has told me to stay indoors, that the coronavirus might be a presence upon our lives, and I mean, if that's happened, then Jack's already doomed. So you are our one ray of sunshine in this trying time. Yeah, we have a Discord. We have a couple of people chatting there already. It's very, very lively. If you want to be a part of a cool new group, get in on the ground zero. You can do that. Elsewise, do tell us if the whole video thing isn't worth it. From our point of view, it's so not. There's been a lot of technical troubles, but you let us know what the faces are making it or breaking for you.
For you, we'll do it.
I've been Connor,
and I am Jack,
and we have been building better dungeons. You can't even see your hands, dude.
No, they can.
Are you sure? I think this bit from their point of view is just you making a face.
That's all my bits. That's my secret.
Please. Yeah, it's good.
Oh, thank God.